The crumbling letter slipped from the chest into Eliza Hall's trembling hands. She stared at the delicate paper, its edges worn and yellowed by time. She was alone in the dimly lit attic, the silence pressing against her ears, broken only by the rustling of the fragile parchment. Her heart raced as she carefully unfurled it, revealing the elegant handwriting that seemed to speak directly to her. The words were unlike anything she had ever seen. A forbidden union, the letter began. A marriage between siblings, one that has been erased from the pages of history. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. The weight of what she held was not just in the fragile paper, but in its contents, an unspeakable truth buried for centuries. As she continued reading, she realized this was no ordinary discovery. This letter was a relic of a twisted past, a story of betrayal and secrecy, hidden for reasons that could unravel everything. The family's legacy had been tainted by this forbidden love, a love that defied not just societal norms, but nature itself. Eliza's mind raced, grappling with the implications of what this meant. She had uncovered something that could change history, exposing not only the family's dark secrets, but also revealing a long-forgotten truth that many had fought to keep hidden. Her fingers trembled as she held the letter higher, the words blurring into one dark mystery that called to her, beckoning her to uncover more. The next morning, Eliza could not shake the feeling that the letter had reached her for a reason. She had spent hours poring over it, yet still, the words seemed to echo in her mind. What were the true intentions behind the sibling marriage? Was it truly driven by love, or was there something more sinister at play? Eliza could feel the weight of this revelation pressing against her chest as she made her way to the university archives. She needed more. More context, more answers. She knew that the truth, however dark it might be, could not remain buried. She was determined to find it, to uncover the layers of deceit that had surrounded this family for centuries. She had no idea where this journey would take her, but one thing was clear. It was not just the history books she would change. Eliza had unwittingly become a part of this tragic tale, and it was her responsibility now to ensure that the truth was told. The deeper Eliza delved into the archives, the more fragmented the pieces of history seemed to become. The family she was investigating had been noble, their lineage rich with power and prestige. Yet beneath the surface, there were whispers of darker secrets, an arrangement that had gone beyond just familial duty. As she flipped through an old journal, she discovered references to letters never sent, contracts bound in secrecy, and cryptic mentions of the siblings' unholy bond. Eliza's breath quickened as she pieced together more evidence of their forbidden love, and the realization hit her like a cold wave. They had not chosen this life. It had been imposed upon them, a political maneuver that no one could escape. With every new document, Eliza felt the pull of their tragic tale. These were not just historical figures. These were real people who had suffered, been trapped, and ultimately lost their own identities in the process. The weight of their story began to consume her, pushing her to continue digging deeper into their twisted legacy. Eliza's search was starting to yield results, but they were unsettling. The more she uncovered, the more the story seemed to spiral into tragedy. Letters between the siblings hinted at their forced union, one that was never truly about love. Instead, it was a desperate attempt to preserve a dynasty that was crumbling under the weight of political intrigue. In the letters, the siblings spoke of their mutual despair, each longing for a life outside of the cruel expectations placed upon them. They were pawns, used in a game much larger than themselves. Yet, despite the sadness in their words, there was also a sense of loyalty, a quiet, unwavering devotion to one another. The realization struck Eliza like a cold gust of wind. This marriage had been more than just an act of political survival. It had been an act of love, twisted and desperate. And with that revelation, Eliza felt the weight of their suffering bear down on her own shoulders. She had to tell their story. The world had to know. As the days passed, Eliza found herself lost in the tragic saga of the siblings. Their lives, so full of complexity and despair, had become intertwined with her own. Their story was no longer just a piece of history to her. It was a mirror to the struggles of her own life. She had once believed that history was about the grand, sweeping narratives, the kings, the battles, the triumphs. But now, she realized it was the small, hidden stories, the ones buried deep within the pages, that held the most power. She had unlocked a door to a dark past, and there was no turning back now. As Eliza stood before the now empty chest that had contained the letter, she felt a quiet sense of finality. Her journey was only beginning, but she had already become a part of their story, and their story would become part of her own. She glanced down at the letter one last time, knowing that the truth she had uncovered would change everything. Days passed, and Eliza found herself immersed in the mystery of the forbidden siblings' marriage. Her nights were spent reading through more old letters, each one pulling her deeper into their world. It became impossible to escape their tragic narrative. As she pieced together their correspondence, she felt their voices echoing in her mind. The siblings, once revered in their time, had been caught in a game much larger than themselves. They had been forced into this marriage by the power struggles of their family. And as much as they longed to break free, duty held them hostage. Eliza could not shake the feeling that they were not so different from her. She, too, had a past filled with obligations, unsaid expectations. As a child of a family with a history in academia, Eliza was taught that truth was sacred, yet she now found herself in a moral dilemma. Should she expose their story, a truth that could shatter the illusion of their family legacy? Or should she respect their secret, allowing the past to remain buried where it belonged? With every new letter, the weight of this choice grew heavier. She wasn't just uncovering history, she was living it. Eliza's internal conflict grew as she continued her research. The siblings' marriage was more than just a personal tragedy. It was a symbol of a broken system. What was meant to preserve a dynasty had instead condemned them to a life of suffering. She began to understand the full extent of their captivity. Though their love was real, it was built on the foundation of something far darker, an empire desperate to maintain control. They had sacrificed their freedom to protect the family name, enduring years of repression, torment, and guilt. Their letters revealed moments of tenderness between them, rare sparks of joy amidst the desolation. Yet, these moments were overshadowed by the knowledge that they could never be free. The power struggles, the alliances, the betrayals, all of it had trapped them. Eliza, now consumed by the depth of their sorrow, couldn't help but reflect on her own situation. Her life too had been dictated by expectations, though not of the same nature. She was a scholar, but she was also a daughter, a role that came with its own set of constraints. The thought made her wonder, could anyone truly be free of the burdens imposed by their past? One evening, after hours of research, Eliza found herself reflecting on the siblings' letters. They spoke of a time before their marriage, when they were merely children caught in a web of familial expectations. Their innocence was slowly replaced by duty, their natural affection twisted by obligation. Yet in their words, Eliza discovered something else, a deep, quiet rebellion. Despite the impossible odds, the siblings had found solace in one another, holding on to their love against all expectations. The tragedy of it all wasn't just in the marriage. It was in their acceptance of it. They had resigned themselves to a life of sacrifice, believing that they could never escape the roles they had been assigned. Their love was an act of defiance, but it was also an act of surrender. Eliza could feel the weight of their love in every word, and for the first time she understood why their story needed to be told. This wasn't just history, it was a warning. A cautionary tale of how the burdens of family and duty could destroy the very essence of a person's freedom. As Eliza's research progressed, she began to make connections between the siblings' letters and the larger political context of their time. Their marriage had been arranged not out of love, but as part of a power struggle within their family and the empire. The union was intended to solidify their family's influence, but it was a hollow victory. Beneath the public facade of royal duty, there was nothing but bitterness and despair. The siblings, though bound by blood and obligation, were isolated from the world they once knew. Eliza's discovery was not just a historical revelation. It was a glimpse into the fragile nature of human existence. Even the most powerful families, with all their wealth and influence, could be torn apart by the forces of duty and fate. She began to feel the weight of their story, on a personal level. In many ways, their lives had mirrored her own family's struggles, obligations and expectations that shaped every decision, every path taken. Eliza had once thought herself free from such constraints, but now she was beginning to question everything. In the final moments of her research, Eliza came across an old, sealed letter, one that had never been opened. It was addressed to the siblings by their mother, who had been the architect of their marriage. Her words were haunting, filled with regret and sorrow. In it, she expressed how much she had tried to protect them, but how her hands were tied by the family's legacy. The letter spoke of a love that was never meant to be, a love that had been sacrificed for the greater good. Eliza's heart ached as she read the words. She had uncovered the deepest secret of their family, a secret that would change everything. The mother's confession was a silent admission of guilt, one that would forever alter the siblings' legacy. In that moment, Eliza realized that the truth she had uncovered was not just a story to be told, it was a warning about the dangers of family, duty, and the price one pays for love. Eliza's research into the forbidden sibling marriage began to uncover unsettling truths. She found more letters, but they spoke of a darker side to their relationship, one built not on love, but duty and survival. Their marriage had been forced upon them by a political scheme designed to protect a crumbling dynasty. The siblings, once beloved by their people, had been trapped in a system that demanded sacrifice. The more Eliza read, the more she saw the signs of manipulation and control. The siblings' affection had been twisted into something that served the interests of others. Eliza's heart ached as she read their desperate words. She had believed their story was one of forbidden love, but now it felt like a tragedy of survival, a betrayal of everything they had ever known. The deeper she dug, the more she understood the cost of their union. The truth was no longer clear-cut, it was tangled in power, obligation, and loss. As Eliza dug further, she found more disturbing details. The siblings had not just been pawns in their family's scheme, they had been emotionally manipulated. The marriage was portrayed as a symbol of loyalty, but behind the facade was a web of deceit. The siblings had been forced to hide their true feelings, suppressing their love for one another to fulfill their roles. Eliza felt a deep sense of sadness for them. The pressure, the isolation, the guilt, it had all become too much for them to bear. They had tried to find solace in each other, but their love had been suffocated by duty. Eliza's own doubts grew. Could she expose the full extent of their suffering? Would it dishonor their memory to reveal how far the manipulation had gone? As the research grew darker, Eliza realized the truth she was uncovering was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. The siblings' tragedy was not just about love, it was about control, power, and loss. Eliza began to question everything. She had come to uncover a love story, but what she found was much darker. The siblings' devotion to each other had been manipulated to serve political agendas. They had been victims of their circumstances, bound together by a force greater than their own desires. Their love was real, but it was a love that had been tainted by power. As Eliza looked through more of their letters, she saw how they had tried to protect each other from the inevitable. They spoke of escaping, of freedom, but each time, duty pulled them back. The tragedy wasn't just in their marriage, it was in their inability to break free. Eliza couldn't help but feel the weight of their pain. She began to feel complicit in their suffering, as though uncovering their story had somehow trapped them all over again. Could she bear to tell the world the full extent of their tragedy? The more Eliza uncovered, the more she realized that the siblings' love was not the tragic romance she had first believed. It was a love that had been born out of necessity, shaped by external forces. And yet, despite the manipulation, they had found ways to connect with one another, to share quiet moments of affection amidst the pressure. The letters spoke of stolen glances, secret conversations, and a bond that had survived even the harshest of circumstances. But Eliza could not ignore the darkness in their story. The political forces that had shaped their lives had left scars on them, scars that could never be fully healed. As she sat with their words, Eliza wondered if it was her place to expose this pain. She had wanted to honor their memory, but now she was unsure if she could. Would revealing everything tarnish their legacy, or was it more important to tell the full story, no matter how painful? Eliza sat with her decision. The research had led her to a place where the truth felt unbearable, yet she knew she could not stop now. She had come too far to turn back. The siblings' love had been manipulated, but their bond was real. The truth had to be told, even if it was painful. Eliza had always believed in the importance of history, in the need to uncover the stories that had been lost. Now she realized that the truth was never simple. It was messy, complicated, and often heartbreaking. The siblings' story was not one of pure romance, but of survival. And in that survival they had managed to love each other despite everything. Eliza knew that sharing their full story would change everything, but perhaps that was the point. Some stories needed to be told, no matter the cost. Eliza uncovered a shocking truth. The siblings' marriage wasn't just a product of love or duty, but a political maneuver designed to preserve their family's crumbling power. The revelation stunned her. The union had been imposed on them by forces greater than their love. This twist shattered everything Eliza thought she understood about their story. She had thought their pain was only personal, but now she saw that it was also deeply political. Their love had been manipulated, their every decision controlled by the family's desperate need to maintain power. Eliza realized that their union wasn't just tragic, it was a consequence of a larger system of control and manipulation. Now, the truth seemed more complicated than ever. With the new information in hand, Eliza felt the walls of her research begin to close in. The siblings' union, once romanticized as a tragic love story, now felt like a tragic byproduct of a political plot. The more she read, the more she saw how little control they had over their own lives. They had been forced into roles that allowed no escape, each letter revealing the painful truth that their love had been suffocated by duty. But despite everything, they still managed to connect in secret moments of tenderness. The contradiction of their relationship, love under duress, left Eliza with a deeper sense of responsibility. She now understood that telling their story wasn't just about revealing love or loss. It was about exposing a system that used people as pawns in the name of power. Eliza's mind raced. The revelation about the political forces behind the siblings' marriage forced her to reassess everything. Was it right to expose their story now, knowing how much of their pain had been dictated by circumstances beyond their control? She wondered if revealing their full truth would tarnish their memory. The siblings' love had been tainted by manipulation, but it was still real. The internal conflict grew stronger. Eliza knew the stakes of her discovery. It wasn't just about telling a personal tragedy, it was about uncovering a system of control that spanned generations. Yet exposing this system could shake the foundations of what people believed about the family. She had to decide, expose the full truth, or protect their legacy by keeping some parts hidden. As Eliza pondered her decision, she realized the importance of telling the full story. The siblings' marriage was not just about love, it was about survival in the face of power. She had been given a rare glimpse into a part of history that had been buried for years. She understood that uncovering this truth would shake the legacy of the family, but perhaps that was the only way to truly honor the siblings. By telling their full story, with all its complexity and darkness, she could help others understand the forces that shaped their lives. It was a painful truth, but it was one that had to be told. Eliza knew that history, however harsh, had to be revealed in its entirety. Eliza knew her next steps would change everything. She had uncovered the truth, but now she had to decide how to present it. Exposing the full story would challenge long-held beliefs, but it was a responsibility she couldn't avoid. She had come too far to stop now. The story of the siblings, their love, and their pain would not remain hidden in the shadows. Their voices would be heard, no matter the cost. As she prepared to share her findings, Eliza felt a mix of fear and resolve. The truth was powerful, and she now understood that she was the one tasked with carrying it forward. The discovery had been made. Eliza had pored over every letter, every journal, every document she could find. The story of the forbidden sibling marriage was no longer hidden in the shadows. It was about to be thrust into the light. The weight of her decision was overwhelming. She had spent so many sleepless nights, feeling the burden of their story pressing on her chest. Now, with the truth uncovered, there was no turning back. She had prepared the final paper, the culmination of her research, ready to be presented to the world. But as she sat in front of her computer, about to send the email to her university colleagues, doubt crept in. What would this revelation do to the family's legacy? Would it destroy the history they had carefully constructed, or would it set them free from the chains of the past? Eliza paused, staring at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She could hear the voices of the siblings in her mind, urging her to act. "Tell the world," they seemed to whisper. "Our story must be known." She hit send. The decision was made. The truth would no longer be silenced. Eliza's heart raced as the confirmation email pinged in her inbox. Her research had been sent. The letter, the journals, the documents, everything had been shared. The weight of the revelation hung in the air, but there was no immediate response. Hours passed, and the silence was deafening. As the days stretched on, the tension built. Eliza sat at her desk, unable to focus on anything but the anticipation of the storm she had set in motion. When the first response came, she could hardly bear to open it. It was from her mentor, a respected historian. She took a deep breath, clicking the email open. "Eliza, this is groundbreaking," it began. "But I must warn you, you have touched something far bigger than we anticipated. There are forces at play here, and this story goes deeper than you realize." Eliza felt a chill run down her spine. She had known this would stir up trouble, but the implications of his words left her unsettled. She wasn't just revealing a story of love and tragedy. She was uncovering a dark part of history that had been buried for a reason. As the days went by, the tension in the air became palpable. The story of the forbidden marriage spread through academic circles, first as whispers, then as articles and blog posts. Each new piece of information that surfaced brought a wave of reaction, some shocked, others enraged, and a few oddly relieved. Eliza couldn't escape the flood of responses. The academic world was split in two. One side hailed her discovery as a necessary reckoning, while the other condemned her for disturbing a legacy that should have remained in the past. But it was the public's reaction that she hadn't anticipated. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, Eliza was being asked to speak at conferences, interviews, and on television. The once quiet historian had become the center of a media storm. At first, the attention was overwhelming. She had never intended for this to become a spectacle, but now, it seemed unstoppable. Every answer she gave felt like it was peeling back another layer of a story that was still unraveling. The media frenzy reached its peak when Eliza was invited to a national television interview. She had prepared herself for this moment, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the intensity of the public's curiosity. The host, eager to explore every facet of the story, asked question after question, each one more probing than the last. "Do you feel any remorse for exposing the family's darkest secrets?" the host asked, his voice sharp with scrutiny. Eliza took a deep breath. "I believe that history belongs to everyone," she said softly. "If we continue to bury our past, we will never truly understand who we are." The host pressed further, asking if Eliza felt responsible for any damage caused to the family's legacy. "I am not responsible for their choices," Eliza replied. "I am merely a witness to their story." The interview lasted for nearly an hour, and when it was over, Eliza felt drained. She had spoken the truth, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been lost in the process. The story was out, but it had come at a cost. In the aftermath of the interview, Eliza sat in her quiet study once more, the weight of everything settling over her. The truth had been spoken, but now she had to live with the consequences. The family whose legacy she had unveiled had been fractured by the exposure, but they were also free from the chains of their past. Eliza realized that the act of telling their story had given them a voice that had been stolen from them long ago. Despite the chaos and pain, there was a certain peace in knowing that their truth was no longer hidden. As she looked at the empty chest where she had once discovered the first letter, Eliza felt a sense of closure. She had honored their memory, and in doing so, had liberated herself as well. The story was no longer just about history, it had become a part of her own journey. And with that, she closed the final page of her research, knowing that history would never be the same again. After the storm of publicity, Eliza sat alone in her study, the weight of her discoveries heavy in the silence. She had given voice to the siblings' story, but did it bring them freedom? The truth was out, but what had changed? It was a bittersweet realization that history, though revealed, would forever alter her life. She wondered if some stories were better left untold, but she had done what she believed was right. Now she faced the quiet aftermath, unsure whether it had liberated anyone, including herself. As the weeks passed, Eliza began to feel the weight of her decision. The discovery had changed everything for the family, and for her. Though the world praised her courage, she saw the cost, legacy, and memory forever alter. Yet there was peace in knowing the truth had finally come to light. The siblings' love, though tragic, was no longer forgotten. Their story, though painful, had meaning, and Eliza had done what was necessary. She had given them a voice, and in turn, found her own. Walking through the university campus, Eliza felt the shift in how others viewed her. No longer just a historian, she was now known as the one who revealed a hidden truth. But beyond the recognition, she realized she had been transformed by the story as much as her audience. The siblings' tale had mirrored her own struggles with duty and freedom. She had given them a voice, and in doing so, had found her own path forward. Months later, Eliza returned to her research with a new focus. The siblings' story had been transformative, but now she sought out untold histories, the forgotten voices of the past. Her work was no longer about the burden of the past, but about uncovering new stories that deserve to be remembered. Her journey had taught her that history wasn't just about facts, it was about people, love, sacrifice, and the courage to reveal the truth, no matter the cost. Years later, Eliza found herself teaching the next generation of historians. The siblings' story, once a burden, had become a part of her legacy. She shared their tale with her students, knowing that their story would live on through them. She had passed on the lessons of duty, love, and sacrifice. In that moment, Eliza understood that history, in all its complexity, was a living thing, ever-changing and always evolving. Years had passed, and Eliza stood before the same chest where it all began. The letter was long gone, and yet the weight of its revelation still lingered in her heart. She had uncovered the darkest parts of history, but in doing so, she had freed it from silence. The world had changed because of her decision, but so had she. The truth, no matter how painful, had a way of setting things right. She had found peace in the story she had told, and now, standing in the quiet of the attic, she realized that sometimes the hardest truths were the ones that needed to be heard the most. The family's legacy, once buried in shame, was now part of history. And Eliza, too, had become a part of it. As the sunlight filtered through the window, she took one last look at the chest, knowing that the past, with all its complexities, was now behind her. It was time to move on. As Eliza left the attic and stepped into the sunlight, she felt the burden of the past finally lift. The story she had uncovered had shaped her life, but it no longer defined her. The world she had uncovered was vast, filled with stories waiting to be told. Her own future was unwritten, and she was ready to write the next chapter. The siblings' tragedy had taught her the power of truth, but it had also taught her the importance of moving forward. The past, as painful as it was, had made her who she was today, and for that she was grateful. It was time to let go. The road ahead was hers to take, and the lessons learned would guide her. As Eliza continued her work, she found herself speaking about the siblings' story less. It was no longer the defining moment of her career, but rather a chapter that had shaped her growth. The lessons she had learned, the courage to speak the truth, the importance of memory, and the necessity of moving forward, became the foundation for her future work. She had become a voice for those whose stories had been forgotten, just as the siblings had once been. Eliza had taken what they had given her, their love, their tragedy, and transformed it into a greater understanding of history. Their legacy would continue, not just in the history books, but in the lives of those who heard their story and understood the power of truth. One evening, as Eliza sat alone in her study, she received a letter. It was from a descendant of the siblings she had uncovered. The letter thanked her for giving voice to their ancestors, for revealing their story to the world. It was a simple message, but in it, Eliza saw the full circle of her work. She had not just uncovered a historical truth, she had helped heal a family's fractured legacy. The weight of her journey, once heavy and uncertain, now felt like a quiet triumph. The siblings, long gone, had found peace, and so had she. In that moment, Eliza realized that history was not just about facts, it was about connection. And her connection to the past would remain forever intertwined with the stories she had told. Years later, Eliza's work became a cornerstone of the history of the forgotten, the silenced, and the misunderstood. The story of the forbidden siblings remained a vital part of her legacy, but it was no longer the only story she told. She had become a champion for the overlooked, the quiet rebels whose tales had been buried by time. As she continued her work, Eliza never forgot the siblings' story. It was a reminder of how truth could change lives, and how the past, once revealed, could shape the future. She had given them a voice, and in return, they had given her the strength to continue her own journey, one story at a time.